Hello and welcome to The Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie, and I am so looking forward to our show tonight. This is actually the very first time we're going to have a moderator, and I'm thrilled to have my own friend, Brian Chris. We met actually through the show, and he reached out to me on YouTube, and here we so I'm very excited about this. This is our first time, as I said. So Brian, I am going to figure out how to do this live with you because I think that once I see you on here, I'll be able to add you as the moderator. So we'll see how this goes. But in the meantime, tonight we are talking about how to rebuild trust. And as I was thinking about this show, especially on the heels of kind of the second half of this phrase, how to rebuild trust after it's broken, it lends to a vulnerability of sorts. You know, after we've had trust broken with someone, man, is it hard to recover. And, you know, I was talking with a client the other day, and they were talking about how their trust had been broken. And I brought up this kind of conversation starter because we were talking about how they would go and engage with that person in conflict and how were they going to effectively move forward. And what we were talking about was just kind of different ways to engage in conflict and how to have these hard conversations. And one thing that I shared with him was actually something that I learned a couple years ago that has really changed the way that I engage in conflict with my darling, actually. And we lead with the phrase, I feel. And leading with that really allows for us to not be assigning blame. It allows for us to engage in a way that immediately it's coming forward with it, almost like an offering, like a peace offering of this is how I feel. This is what I'm giving to you. It's almost a gift. And it's a gift of vulnerability. It's a gift of I'm bringing my heart to you. I'm offering it. And can we talk about this? Versus you made me feel very different than I feel. So you're kind of taking accountability and responsibility for the emotions that are being activated in that moment by way of whatever that experience was. You're sitting in your experience. And what that does is that it like I said, it kind of extends the person the opportunity for them to then offer up their experience. Because so often, what I have found is that many people in relationship, they're actually not coming after us maliciously. They're not doing anything with intention or malice. That most often, that's, I would imagine, if it's probably like 85% of people are not malicious in their intentions toward us. Now, what that might look like so often is actually it's almost an accidental and or an acting out of protection, like a defensive mechanism. So just because somebody has, and you know what, Brian, I just jumped in here. I just see you now. I'm going to add you as a moderator. For those of you who, we have kind of a golden rule here. Anyone who is not kind is just going to be hidden. So bam diggity, thank you for joining us. And you can listen. So this whole conversation is really predicated on, are we willing to, in regards to a relationship after trust has been broken, are we willing to sit in our experience and even know our experience in order for us to perhaps ever at any point rebuild? But in order for us to ever look at the other person and try to rebuild something, we actually need to know the truth of what's actually going on inside of us first. Because there is no way we can try to repair something that we don't even understand the depth to which it is broken. So in order for reparation to take place, it requires us to know all that is going on inside of us. And how does this present moment actually, how is it tied to the past? Because there is no neutral experience that we can have that does not have any kind of ties or tethers to the past. And rarely, I'll say, maybe not no, but rarely do we have an encounter today in our adult life that doesn't have some attribution to past pain. And so when we look at kind of the story and we look at the wall of our experiences here today in the present, and we're kind of mapping it out, and we realize how many of these moments here today are colored by the past. So I'm actually not even able to see the present clearly. I'm actually not able to really truly see reality for what it is because I'm so colored. Like the lens through which I view the world, it's like when you put your eyes up at the optometrist and they adjust the dials and all of a sudden you can see clearly. The more we understand the past, the more we're able to see clearly for the present, because now we know where our own blind spots are. There's this biblical concept of take the log out of your own eyes so that you can see clearly, to remove the speck in your brother's. And regardless of whether it may be a boulder in your brother's or not, we actually cannot see at all their experience until we actually sit with ours. One note about the rebuilding trust. It's so important that we have this conversation, because so often it's just an automatic no, I'm not going to rebuild that at all. Somebody broke my trust. Or perhaps it's an automatic assumption that it's going to be rebuilt. And we can play on either sides of the lane depending on the relationship and who that person is, depending on the past. So when we have these moments of trust being dismantled, there's kind of, I like to think of it as, what's the right word here? I like to use the word often KPIs, the key performance indicators, but it's not the right word for this. It would be effectively like, what are the measures by which I assess this relationship and whether it should be rebuilt or not? And one of those is 1000% the past. How much have I actually already encountered something like this with this person? So the past is a metric by which we measure, okay, how am I going to move forward? Is this relationship worthy of being rebuilt? Another metric is actually, well, who do I want to be in regards to this relationship? And if I fundamentally cannot operate in alignment with my own ideal, then this relationship is actually impossible. Because y'all, this is actually a really, really good thought exercise. And it's a good kind of soul exercise too. I once took a pause and sat and thought about each of my top 5 relationships, my parents being in there. So specifically to this example of my parents, I sat down with both of them. And, I analyzed my mom and my relationship with my dad. And I thought, okay, well, who do I want to be in each one? If I was to pass away tomorrow, how much of that relationship would they say and kind of recount with truth and accuracy of who I wanted to be in the first place? Is that actually, am I living accordingly now today in alignment for them to be able to say those things about me? And so this question of, okay, well, how much is the past coloring my ability to see the propensity for rebuilding this relationship that's been broken, also needs to be countered with our own potential for that relationship in and of itself, but also for our own selves. Because y'all, if we don't have clarity around who we want to be, especially in that particular relationship, it needs to get personal. It needs to get tailored to that individual relationship of how do I want to show up in that relationship. And here's the reason why. Some relationships, it's purely just kind of fun. It's a lighthearted relationship. So if we maybe find out that person isn't to be trusted with a secret, but I continue to work with this person. All right, noted. I'm not going to trust them with secrets, but we can all still go out and have happy hour. That's a very different type of, breaking of trust. All right, the rebuilding of it perhaps, is that going to look different, but I'm still going to be around that person. So who do I want to be in that relationship? Well, my ideal then is that I'm going to have wisdom about what I share and what I don't share. But then if I've got a relationship with a sibling or with a parent or a family member, a cousin, and they have proven consistently to not be able to be a place that's worthy of trust, okay, well then what's my ideal in this scenario? If I want to keep peace in the family, because that's part of your ideal, but if I want to speak the truth, and if I don't want to live a lie, now we've got all these kind of competing ideals. And so I just love the example Theodore Roosevelt talks about in his speech in 1914 in Paris. He talks about the man in the arena. And so when we go into the arena, it's kind of these competing values kind of battle out against each other. And Jordan Peterson once said this, and I'm talking about the OG Peterson. He's changed a lot over the last couple of years. I think he's getting old, unfortunately. But he talks about the ability to contend with different thoughts in our own mind. Do we have almost like the maturity to battle out these different thoughts and to engage and contend around what is true and who do I want to be? And if truth is the ideal, but what about unity? And which one is going to win, especially when it comes to family environments and family dynamics. And so when we kind of battle out our values, then we really get to kind of uncover how much has the past weighed in my own value system. Because sometimes our values can be rooted in fear. So I have found that my value for truth can actually be rooted in the fear of not knowing what people think. And I know why, because I've been in a relationship before where I kind of was in a dishonest relationship for many years, where it turns out that person really didn't love me, even though they said that they did. And I just knew it. I knew it in my gut that they didn't, but I never did anything about it because I chose to honor their word over my intuition. And so I've learned to kind of re-engage and rebuild trust with myself so that now I can engage with other relationships and with other people coming from a place of, okay, I actually have recovered my own kind of home base. Think of it on like a diamond, like a baseball diamond. Like your relationship with yourself is the home plate, and your infield, you got to be tight with your infield. So this is your first baseman, your pitcher, especially, like that's the person who's closest to you, especially your catcher. So you've got these three positions centered around you, and you've got these moving targets, which is your infield, but then you've got the outfield, which are still going to have access to you and still have an ability to impact you. But if we're not at our own home plate and we're over it literally in left field or over in right field or center field and camping out with other people, what's your experience like about their experience of encountering us or even encountering the world? That really can throw us off when we're not coming back to home plate and we don't know our own experience. So the more we're actually building trust with ourselves, the more we have the opportunity and even the foundation to then go and have reparation with other people once trust is broken. But it all depends on how much of the past is playing a role in this moment here in the present, and how much do I even know my own values for who I want to show up as. And then the grounding question underneath that one on the values is, well, how many of my values are actually predicated in fear versus I chose that value and I chose that ideal of who I want to be and who I want to show up as in this relationship. I just want to join the chat here. William, I'm glad to see you. I'm glad you're back. Aragon, good to see you. Bob Cox, hello. Larry, we're talking about basically how to rebuild relationships when they've been broken. And it's not even just relationships, it's really rebuilding trust, because so much of the time, I don't know about y'all, I really broke trust with myself. And so a lot of times it's the work to rebuild the trust with ourselves that then allows for us to be able to engage with the world around us. But it has to be coming from a very strong, I don't love the word grounded because I feel like it's overused, but it's true. It's kind of like I'm rooted and grounded, so to say. Ajenke, thanks for joining. RPR, good to see you. John Mo, hello. Just scrolling up in the chat. MDef, hello. Thanks for joining. Bam Diggity. Young Cup says, do you have children? No, I do not. Hopefully at some point. Alex, do you hold a dualistic view of reality? What do you mean by that? I feel like that could go in so many different directions. So I'm curious what you mean by that. But tell me what you mean. Mr. Dunham, trust seems to be worsening for the general population. Not good. I think it's primarily our corrupt government. You know, I have seen that to be so true. Y'all, I'd actually love to know in the chat how many of you feel like you can trust people. Like when you're out going and grabbing a coffee, or you're out going and getting gas at the gas station, like, do you actually feel safe? And I'm really curious to hear what what y'all's experience is, because I think that you're bringing up something really, really timely, Mr. Dunham, of how many of us actually have just an underlying trust of our own fellow man, you know? Larry, my name's Christine. It's good to see you. User says, think about your health, not about people. You know, it's interesting. It's like, I think part of the reason, perhaps, this is interesting. Part of the reason why I think we have broken trust with so many around us is because there hasn't been there's a lot of inward thinking. There's a book by David Brooks called The Second Mountain. And he talks about people who exist on that first mountain, and it's all about them. It's that first mountain that we'll climb, that will focus on our career, focus on what we want, focus on our own success and name and lights. And then eventually we get to a point, and it pretty much is without fail. Like, we even see it in Hollywood, where you get to a point where you realize you're just not satisfied. And so then you're faced with this decision of, am I going to crest the second mountain or try to go and scale the first summit again? And so to then go to the second mountain, that really is all about community. And it's living in regard to others, and living with others in mind, and living from a point of servitude and sacrifice and love. And it's propelled from this really beautiful place of realizing meaning is actually found so much in community. Meaning and our identity, even, it's like knowing your identity from that first mountain for the purpose of loving and giving to the second. So to do the work, to know, and kind of, we're talking about this analogy of being on a baseball diamond. Being at home plate does not mean you're null and void of everybody else, but the reality is that you know your own experience. For me, I grew up on the second mountain. I grew up actually with a very disconnected sense of self. I had no idea who I was. And actually, the more the proverbial you, like in the environment I was raised in, it was very conservative, very religious. And if you pursued knowledge of self, it was very prideful or egoic. And I think that you can, with every shadow or every light, there's a shadow. So I'm sure that you can get to that point. But it was viewed so negatively that there was no encouragement of understanding, well, who was I uniquely created to be? And so on the Knowing Show, we talk about identity in the vein of, there's kind of two parts of our identity. Part A is effectively, well, okay, who am I as it pertains to who God uniquely made? Like, I am uniquely, wonderfully fashioned, made, designed. I'm here for a reason. My unique gifts, my skill sets, talents, etc. Nobody else is me. And identity B is that we are each loved and chosen and honored and worthy. And actually, in so being, we're very connected with each other, and no one's better than somebody else. And what a beautiful thing it is to be so united. So there's the identity piece of unity and identity piece of individuality. And if we look at either one in isolation, we're missing 50% of the other side of it. But when we look at the whole picture, all of a sudden knowing who we are becomes the biggest gift, because in so knowing, we then can so love and give and really scale that second mountain, and do it so much so for the sake of everyone around us. Just jumping back here in the chat. Alex says, dualistic view is believing that you are separate from the creator God. A monistic view is believing God is one and existence itself. We are God experiencing himself. Then I would say, well, I'm curious. Actually, this is an interesting question. So, Alex, have you ever found somebody in between? Because I think that the dualistic view has really been, I've seen so much damage and experienced so much damage of that, but I've also seen so much damage from the monistic view. So I'm curious if you've ever seen kind of the bringing together of, I believe that Christ is in all. And I do believe that God is other. So it's kind of like both. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, though, because I like that description there. Briefly, knowledge. Thanks for joining. Chic, Enzo. Hello, Enzo. I'm glad you're here. Have met. Hello. User. Oh my gosh. Mr. Dunham says loneliness is growing for many due to tech, they say. And it's wild. Technology is supposed to be the thing that connects us. You know, it's funny, y'all. I think that this is why we need each other. This is why we need community. And this is why I'm so grateful for even just this chat here, you know, that we have each other. So I love that. Just looking. The gray tone. I don't know if you're still here. I saw your note though. I'm glad to hear you say you enjoyed it when it was moderator free. I've heard both. You know, I've heard both that they do like it moderated and not. So I've heard both things. But Frosted Cupcake, good to see you. Radian, hello. Z Shan, hello. Y'all, I want to read, you know, to this point about trust and rebuilding trust. I just want to read a quick lesson from A Course in Miracles. We've been reading this most every day since the beginning of the year, and we're on lesson 181. And the lesson today kind of inspired this conversation. And, you know, Mr. Dunham, to your point about loneliness growing, I think that this element of trust really needs to be examined for that very reason, among others. But man, is it a lonely place to exist here in this world, you know? And I don't think it needs to be that way. But I think it is for so long as we don't know how to. It's a reclamation of trust almost. But it starts with our own work, us actually being able to go in and do the work and reclaim that relationship with ourselves and be able to then engage with other people, knowing that we're safe. Because isn't that so much of the problem, is that we don't actually feel safe in our own bodies. So why would we ever feel safe with anybody else? And so for us, we're looking at relationships all around us and we have our guards up and we're like waiting for somebody to come and attack us, when all the while we're actually pushing people away because we don't actually have that kind of openness and trusting element to let them in. And so the question is, if we can have, and I think that this is really, really interesting. And I think that frankly, this is probably a book. Reclaiming that type of relationship with ourselves allows for safety in relationships horizontally. But that we fundamentally cannot be safe with others if we're not vertically safe ourselves. We're not safe in and of like our own skin, you know? And y'all, we see this in relationships where women will go back to their abusers. We see this where people will return to bad toxic situations and work environments, even just because they're afraid of what will happen if they leave. But what happens if we were to reestablish and reclaim that safety in our own experience and in our own physical bodies? Now we can trust, I will get myself out of here if this is not a good situation. I know that I have the tools and skill sets emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, physically to protect myself. So on the Knowing Show, we talk about the full spectrum of the human intelligence, the intellectual intelligence, emotional, physical, and spiritual intelligences. And so cultivating them, we also need to understand, what does it look like for me to be safe and what are my own defenses? I was in England. I forget which little town I was in. I was near Rye, so like southern London or south of London. And I never in my life had felt so unsafe until that moment, because I knew that it was just a weird situation. I didn't have any phone signal and I was in a random little alcove of town and I couldn't call an Uber and I actually literally did not know where I was. And so I just had this moment, and I think this is what made me feel afraid. I had this moment where I realized I could not defend myself. I didn't have, like, if somebody attacked me, I don't really know how to physically protect myself. And therefore I did not trust myself. And therefore I was not trusting of others. But man, if I know that I can enter into a relationship, and obviously the goal is that we learn some semblance of self-defense in that regard, but the same goes emotionally. if we can't trust ourselves to know when we're in a bad relationship, if we can't trust ourselves in a bad work environment to be able to say, you know what, I'm out. This isn't good. Or even to look our boss in the eye and say, you know, this feels disrespectful. There's such a risk there because we don't know how they're going to respond. We feel unsafe often due to the lack of predictability. But if we know that we ourselves are predictable, that at least brings a semblance of covering and a semblance of safety so that then we can be brave and go into the arena like Theodore Roosevelt talks about and dare greatly to be vulnerable with someone else around us and say, you know, that's not true. Or I will not stand to witness this kind of injustice again. Or I will not be spoken to this way. It's against my values, or it's against even my own values is probably the best one. Y'all, if we have not taken the time to ask these questions of how does the past play into the present? How much is my own ideal even clear for me? Do I even know my own values? Do I even know how I want to show up? It's very unlikely, it's very rare that we're going to be able to rebuild trust with somebody else after it's broken because we fundamentally don't have that trust with ourselves. But if we've done the work to heal our own relationship with ourselves, and it is a healing, I had to really do work to repair that relationship with myself. And the way that I did that was, well, actually, I'm going to wait to share that. I want to jump back here in the chat because I actually think that that's a really, really important conversation. Rob Mack, hello. Cresnaldo. Oh, man. I'm glad you're here. Acknowledge, hello. Larry, I'm glad you're here. Ima, hello. I love this. Iva says, I would teach you Kung Fu Panda. I would be so grateful. I need to be knowing how to keep myself safe. That's so funny. American Redneck, I'm glad to see you. Hello. Achilles, good to see you. Will Cable, hello. Organic, Z-Sham, hello. Marty, I've never seen Fight Club. I've really been wanting to see it, and I actually think the antithesis of that, I think all of us have so much purpose. Alex, Christocentric monistic universalism. Interesting. Axiom says he's going to check it out. I'll look it out. I'll look for it too. That's very, very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Global, hello. All right, just scrolling down. Rob Mack, you know, I don't know if you made this comment yesterday. Landmark Forum. I've heard of that, and I don't know what it is, but I think is it a mastermind or something like that? Larry, you are more than welcome to guess. James, midlife crisis. I don't know what that is. I love that. Larry says, just be nice and kind to others. It's really quite simple. Y'all, I would love to know, you know, we were talking earlier about what, you know, how many of us actually feel safe in relationships. And I'd love to know for y'all, how many of you have actually gone through the process of maybe you've had to reclaim your relationship with yourself and rebuild trust with yourself. So I'd love to know, for anyone who's willing, I'd love to kind of share or read from you your comments on what did you do to rebuild trust with yourself? Because I think we could all use that, especially Mr. Dunham talked about earlier, you know, loneliness is such an epidemic. And so much of that is a result of technology. Well, let's reverse that. Like, let's use technology for good. And so I'd love to know, how can we all rebuild that kind of trust? How can we return to that home plate, to use that analogy of the baseball diamond? And then from there, how do we cultivate and rebuild trust in relationships? So for whoever's willing, I'd love to share just what you guys have done to rebuild relationship with yourself. And while you guys are typing, I'll go ahead and share one thing for me that was really helpful was understanding literally those past experiences. So often our reaction here in this moment has roots. And a lot of times I will self analyze my reaction to something and be like, what's happening right now does not warrant this. And therefore, I'll silence my emotions and just suppress it. But really, if I was to actually just listen to what it is that my body or my emotions are reacting to, I would realize it's actually due to the past, not this present moment. So it's almost like letting go and allowing space to express those emotions. And expressing might even just be on a piece of paper, like a journal, or typing a note in my phone. And in so doing, I then can kind of take a third party, kind of an outside the body experience, and like, oh, that's weird that I'm reacting this way. I'm a pretty logical person. Why am I having this emotion? There must be something deeper. So it's effectively affording ourselves respect and being curious about, why is this coming up? And then being curious about it to then allow for that Genesis story, that origin story to come forth. But if we're judging that emotion to begin with, there is no way that origin story will ever come about, because we're silencing it. We're suppressing it before it even has a chance to tell us a story. You know, emotions hold data. There's literally stories within the fabric of our emotions. And so for so long as we're not allowing them a voice, we're silencing the data that it's trying to tell us. Just jumping back here in the chat, Scott Williams. So my question was, what have you all done to basically reclaim your relationship with yourself? And Scott Williams says beer. Just scrolling down. Oh, Michael, I'm glad you're back. Michael Jameson on Facebook. I had to remind myself that I need to be in fellowship with other mature believers and be in God's word. Just scrolling down. I love that. Honestly, community, that's I love that point in terms of restoring relationship to ourselves. You know, that's actually one of the best ways. I love that you said that, Michael. Michael, I'm still recovering from trauma from being physically and verbally mistreated by my own parents. Wow. Man, I feel that in my gut hearing you say that, Michael. I'm so sorry to hear that. Y'all, that's the thing, you know, going to this analogy again of that baseball diamond. We're home plate, right? Like restoring that relationship with ourselves. But when our pitcher and our catcher are not to be trusted, we're looking over our shoulder. We're afraid of what's going to come behind us. And we're also afraid of the future, because what happened back there is going to happen there. So in Michael, just what you said, that's so, man, it like, I feel kind of choked up just thinking about it. Michael, what you shared, that's so devastating and so vulnerable, is perhaps the very thing that is kind of like the crux of what we're talking about tonight, of how to rebuild these relationships can only come after we've rebuilt that trust with ourselves. Because when other people have proved so damaging in like really tender areas of our lives and at a really tender age, man, it makes us wary of everybody else. But if we can go and heal those parts, this is the thing that's crazy that I think is way like under discussed. If we have the ability to go back to that age, to when we were hurt and betrayed and abandoned and rejected and abused, and to literally go and tend to that little kid. Because the thing is, today we're the age that our parents were. So we can go and actually heal that little kid in us that hasn't been hurt, that has been still hurt and needs to be healed. And in so doing, we're like closing the gap. And in closing the gap emotionally of that pain, here's the thing that's kind of crazy. It's like that kid actually can now mature beyond the age that it got stuck at in emotional or physical pain. So going back is kind of like going back and getting the kid and hugging on them and loving on them and then bringing them closer to the present, so that we're not stuck in the past anymore. And we're just incrementally moving them to be a little bit older every single day, every single moment we sit with them in their emotion, rather than judging their emotion, rather than silencing it or suppressing it. We're honoring it, showing regard and respect, and then being curious. Again, that honoring emotion does not mean that emotion sits at the helm of the ship. that emotion does not drive us and be the final naysayer in terms of our decisions. Viktor Frankl, who authored the book Man's Search for Meaning, has this infamous quote: between stimulus and response is choice. But the stimulus is going to cause an emotion. And our choice then is to sit with the emotion, understand it because it has data, looking and listening to the story, and then we make the decision on our response. The emotion isn't the response. The emotion is the data that helps inform our response. And maybe informing the response is, oh, we probably should not re-engage with that person again. Or maybe the emotion is, I know that somebody else 20 years ago caused similar pain like this, but this is not that person. So I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to actually take time to heal you because clearly that relationship in the past is still causing us pain. We would not have the reaction today in the present if that thing in the past had not happened. So if we want to have a different response here in the present, then we need to change the past by going back and healing it. And then we can move forward out of that kind of stuckness. Just jumping back here in the chat. First class, hello. I'm glad you're here. Big Skunk, what does evaluation have to do with trusting yourself? Or self-evaluation have to do with trusting yourself? Well, for me, that was so important that I knew my own experience. I think I lost trust with myself and broke trust with myself when I kept ignoring what intuition was telling me. It was like I was ignoring the data. So we talk on the Knowing Show about our 4 intelligences: intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, spiritual, and physical intelligence. And so our body stores data physically, and it comes and it tells you data later. It stores memories. It stores trauma. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's such an incredible book. And so physically, our bodies store data. So if we have a physical response or an emotional response, it is our body effectively telling us, hey, red flag, something's going on. But by cutting off access to those parts or to those voices or to those flags, we're breaking off trust as a result. So this self-evaluation that I'm talking about is to sit with each one of these intelligences and identify, where have I broken trust? Where have I misplaced and moved out of my own experience to go sit with somebody else and actually let them define what's real for me? And that's so much of what a codependent is. And that's how I lived for a long time. And so by kind of a process of rebuilding really did include self-evaluation for, where have I broken trust? And where do I need to repair that? And where do I need to actually go back and heal the past to kind of fix that? Just jumping back here in the chat. Kata says, trust hard to gain, easy to lose, never rebuildable again. Read real cases of divorce. It's really interesting. I was talking with someone the other day, and effectively the question is, can we trust that person's heart? Do we trust that person's heart for us, towards us, or not? And I think that's the question. I had a moment the other day with my darling where I forget exactly what was happening, but I just had this moment where I was like, oh yeah, I actually do trust his heart is for me and he loves me. Okay, that now is going to be the lens through which I look at the situation. But if I can't say that, then I am definitely not going to be able to operate from a place of trust. So in order for us to have any semblance of a relationship with people, I think we actually need to question the very fabric of, are you for me? Do you love me? And am I for you? Do I love you? And once we both have kind of established that, then I think that we can rebuild from there. So to your point, trust is hard to gain. I just wonder if that's actually, should we start out with a kind of a predisposed, I'm going to be expecting good from you, and I'll be surprised if something happens that's negative, rather than going in with this anticipatory a kind of surveillance of like, I'm waiting for you to mess up. I'm waiting for you to prove me right. And so often, y'all, if we're going in with that expectation, that usually is because of our own past. So this is why we need to ask this question: is how is the past showing up in the present? Because man, if I had never been hurt, well, then I would be coming in like expecting good things. And this is a real question for all of us. Like, who do we want to be? That's why those two questions: how is the past showing up, and who do I want to be? Do I want to be somebody that trusts people? Do I want to be somebody that is loving? Do I want to be somebody that is hoping and expecting good from my fellow brothers? Or do I want to be somebody that is looking out for the worst and expecting the worst and is jaded and expecting that to be the case and that to be my experience? So the question of how is the past showing in, and then, okay, well then who do I want to be? Both of those are really, really important. Steve says, I always say actions equal truth. Words are just words, but actions mean more. Yeah, Steve, I love that. People say, love is a verb. And I agree with you. I also think love is a noun. It's, do I actually, it's the emotion and logic coming together. We've got the left hemisphere of the brain, the logic and the intellect, and then we've got the right hemisphere of the brain, the emotions. And so like emotionally, do I actually feel loved by you? And intellectually, through, not just intellectually, I guess it's more so like mind body in that regard, but the body, I guess, is the manifestation of it. So I guess that kind of breaks down a little bit. The emotional side of the noun of love is so, so, so important, because, and that's where the intuition plays a part. So to the point of trust is actually an emotional thing. I have been in a relationship where somebody did the right things, and emotionally there was a real cognitive dissonance because they were saying one thing and doing something very differently. So they were technically doing the right action, and even their words were kind of the right words to say, but the emotion behind it was very disconnected. So it was like the rolling of eyes. They technically weren't really saying or doing anything wrong, but then they were like, okay, yeah, let's go to dinner. And you're like, well, no, I'd rather not. And it's like, no, we'll go to dinner. And it's very, very disconcerting when you don't have the love and the verb and the noun overlapping, and the noun and the verb are not consistent. Lonnie, I love you saying this. So interesting. It's funny. I think that we all can have that tendency, and it's really important that we at least get into these environments where we at least have the ability to analyze the truth, because that is so important in building trust. Guy that comments, lose trust, lose me. Also, hi guy that comments. Jim Bob, I'm glad to see you. Thanks for joining. Todd Smith, hello. Oh, American Redneck, I love you, my friend. Thank you. Bryce, hello. Good to see you. Lonnie, thanks for joining. Sunshine and humidity, hello. The author Stoic, hello. Sifa says, my father used to say love and trust are the same things. Wow, Jim Bob, I'm so grateful for this. I mean, you're so honest here. I was emotionally codependent. I could never be alone. I know what you mean. Health is first. Too many forgot that. Big Skunk says you can't change the past. Big Skunk, have you ever read The Gap and the Gain? It's by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. It's really, they offer a really, really interesting perspective of, once you've forgiven what happened in the past, your perspective on it changes. So maybe the physical event isn't what changed, but our perspective really, really does. Mr. Anderson, it's good to see you. During my divorce 6 years ago, it was like trauma all the way back to childhood came out. I have PTSD and I'm bipolar, and my first major episode occurred right in the middle of my divorce. It was last It lasted like a month. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. Man, it's funny. I had a similar experience where I felt like I realized what I was most afraid of in childhood. That fear came out during my divorce. And I think so much of it was because I had always been afraid of not being wanted, and then to not be wanted by the person who knows you the best. That's perhaps the most. It was very devastating. Um, but yeah, I think that isn't that such a true statement that like that's when we kind of see ourselves in so many ways. Oh my gosh, Michael, this is so wise. We're not safe in ourselves when we don't respect ourselves and we allow someone else to be or we allow ourselves to be exploited by someone who is toxic. That's so wise. Wow. Enigma, hello. Good to see you. Sorry, my alarm keeps going off because I need to send an invoice. Oh, I love this. Oh, Jerry. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrong. Yeah, hello. Hefe, are we talking about food? Because I'm all for it. No, but you know what? Tomorrow is trivia day. So for those of you who have never joined us, we're playing trivia tomorrow at, oh golly, what time? I need to schedule trivia. Trivia is going to be at 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, 3 p.m. Pacific. So I'll go ahead and schedule that. Ronnie, thank you for your comment. I'm really grateful to see that. Thank you. Leob, good to see you. Dino, hello. American Redneck, I will seek to try to read all comments after this conversation. I love that Silver Lake says you have to have a friendship before you can have a relationship. Matthew says, who left who? My husband left me. It was very devastating. If you respect yourself, you don't accept disrespectful conduct towards yourself from anyone. I think all of us could use a reminder of that. Devante, oh my gosh, did Mexico just win? Oh my gosh. All right, scrolling. Y'all, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate this. Ronnie, hold on, it says, kind of related to the topic, more advice, because I'm a volunteer. My friends always tell me givers have to set boundaries because takers don't have any. What a good point. Y'all, here's a real aspect that I've seen in myself and seen in so many others. And for those of you who have maybe struggled with codependency in the past, I think so much of the reason why relationships are broken and trust is broken is because we never even communicated what we needed in the first place. We never said what our expectations were. We never actually stated a boundary. And then all of a sudden trust is broken and they're caught by surprise because we never gave them any kind of warning that we were fanning out or we were running low on steam on what we were giving or capacity or whatnot. So I think that there's actually a real reminder here. I'm so glad you said that, Ronnie, because I think that a lot of times it's our own doing that relationships break. So I think that's just super, super wise. Waffles, hello. Thanks for joining. Angel. Thank you. Craig says trivia when? Tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern. We have trivia every first Wednesday of the month. So this is like our time to just have fun. Mohammed, good to see you. J Roke, Diesel, good to see you guys. Thanks for joining. Mutant, hello. Antonio, Moodle, Devnand, Corey. Hello, Corey. Good to see you. All right, y'all. I need to jump off. Thank Omar. Thank you so much for joining. MS. Thanks for coming on, y'all. I'm so grateful. I will see you tomorrow for just having fun. No, no agenda other than playing trivia. So we'll see you guys tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Brian, thank you, my friend. Brian was on here keeping the chat from going too crazy. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for you. All right, y'all. I will see you tomorrow.